The invisible traps. There are prisons in this world far more dangerous than any built from stone or steel. They don't have walls. They don't have guards. No barbed wire surrounds them. And yet, millions live in them every single day without even realizing they're trapped. These prisons cannot be found on any map. You can't point to them on a globe, and you won't stumble upon them while traveling, because they don't exist in the physical world. They exist inside the mind, silent, invisible, deadly. Think about it. How many times have you felt exhausted, anxious, hollow, and you couldn't explain why? How many times have you blamed yourself, thinking something is wrong with me, when the truth is, you were never the problem? The problem is the invisible architecture built around your life, subtle, unseen structures that shape the way you think, the way you feel, the way you live. These structures don't need violence to destroy you. They don't need force. They work in a far more sinister way by making you forget who you are. And here's the tragedy. You've walked through these places before, you've lived in them. Maybe you're living in one of them right now, but today that ends. Today, we shine a light into the darkness. We reveal the 7 dangerous places that quietly kill your authenticity, your freedom, your soul. Not by chains, not by cages, but by the most subtle prison of all, the one inside your own mind. So lean in, listen carefully, because what you're about to hear could be the very thing that sets you free. Chapter 1. The Hall of Mirrors. Imagine walking into a grand hall where every wall is made of glass. At first it feels magical. Every step you take, every gesture, every thought, reflected back at you in infinite copies. You smile, and the hall smiles back. You nod, and the hall nods with you. At first it feels safe, even comforting, because nothing ever threatens you here. No criticism, no contradiction, no sharp edge to cut your beliefs. But here's the danger. In this perfect comfort, your mind begins to shrink. What once felt like protection quietly becomes a coffin lined with mirrors. In this hall of mirrors, every voice echoes your own. Every opinion you hold is confirmed, amplified, and sent back to you. You start to believe this is truth, because everyone around you seems to agree. But look closer. They aren't agreeing out of wisdom. They're reflecting just like the mirrors, and soon you lose the ability to tell the difference between reality and repetition. Growth requires friction. Fire requires resistance. But in this hall there is no resistance, and so your fire dies. Your brilliance suffocates in the smoke of your own reflection. The mind was never designed to live in constant agreement with itself. It was meant to be stretched, tested, refined by challenge. Without friction, the blade dulls. Without storms, the tree never grows strong roots. But in the hall of mirrors, everything is smooth, too smooth, and slowly you become brittle, afraid, fragile. A single new idea feels like an attack. A different perspective feels like betrayal. And so you cling harder to the mirrors, begging them to only reflect what you already know, while forgetting that the unknown is where your soul breathes. I once knew a man who spent his entire life in this hall, surrounded by people who thought exactly like him, spoke like him, lived like him. Politics, religion, lifestyle, everything aligned. He thought it made him wise. He thought he was strong. But the truth? His capacity to think was shrinking. His world grew smaller each day, until one day, confronted with a single idea outside his circle, he collapsed, terrified, broken. He had mistaken sameness for wisdom. He had confused reflection for reality, and the price he paid was his freedom to think. This is the true poison of the Hall of Mirrors. It doesn't kill you suddenly. It kills you slowly, like frost on a flower. You don't notice it happening. You laugh with friends, agree with neighbors, share the same opinions day after day, and think this is harmony. But harmony without diversity is not music. It's monotony, and monotony is death for the human spirit. Soon you stop asking questions, you stop imagining, you stop becoming, and all that remains is an echo chamber of your own fears, dressed up as truth. Here's the brutal truth. If you only see yourself reflected back, you never truly see yourself at all. Mirrors can only show you what you already are, never what you could become. And when your world becomes nothing but mirrors, You lose the most sacred gift of being human, the ability to grow beyond yourself. Real growth is uncomfortable. Real wisdom is earned by walking into rooms where you don't fit, listening to voices that unsettle you, daring to hold ideas that scare you. That is where life begins, outside the mirror's edge. The escape from the Hall of Mirrors is not easy, but it is simple. You must deliberately seek discomfort. Find voices that disturb you, not to argue, not to destroy, but to stretch. Read books that contradict you. Sit with people who challenge your worldview. Let your certainties tremble, because only in the trembling do you discover what is real. You don't need more mirrors. You need windows. Windows that show you the vast, wild landscape of reality beyond the glass prison you've built for yourself. So ask yourself tonight, am I living in the Hall of Mirrors? Am I surrounded only by reflections of myself? If every voice I hear agrees with me, am I truly alive, or am I simply repeating? Growth is born in uncertainty, not in perfect agreement. Life begins where comfort ends. Step out of the hall, break the mirrors, and let the sharp light of new ideas cut through the glass, because only then will you stop echoing and start becoming. Chapter 2. The Arena of Comparison. Welcome to the Arena of Comparison. Imagine standing in a stadium where the crowd never stops cheering, not for you, but for everyone else. Every time you win, someone else wins bigger. Every time you rise, another rises higher. Here, no matter what you achieve, it is never enough. More money, more success, more beauty, more recognition, there's always someone ahead. And the cruelest part? This game is rigged. There is no finish line. You will keep running until your soul collapses and still the voice whispers, "Not enough." The arena disguises itself beautifully. It tells you, look at them, doesn't it make you want to improve? It promises that comparison will be your fuel, your inspiration. But inspiration doesn't come from comparison. Exhaustion does. Because the moment you tie your worth to another person's journey, you hand over your happiness to someone else's scoreboard. You start chasing shadows, believing life is a race, when in truth, life is art. And art cannot be compared. No painting is better than another, only different. So why do you chain your soul to a finish line that doesn't exist? I once knew a woman who finally achieved her dream promotion after years of sacrifice. Her family celebrated. Her friends congratulated her. But that very night, she couldn't sleep. Why? Because another colleague had been promoted to an even higher position. Her triumph felt meaningless in the shadow of someone else's victory. This is the poison of comparison. It robs you not only of joy, but of presence. Even in your highest moments, it whispers, look at them. You become blind to your own progress, deaf to your own music because you're too busy measuring the noise outside. Comparison tricks you into believing life is linear, like a racetrack, where everyone starts at the same point and ends at the same finish line. But life is not linear. Life is a canvas, and each soul paints with its own colors, its own strokes, its own rhythm. To compare your painting with another is insanity. Van Gogh never competed with Picasso. A mountain doesn't compete with the ocean. They simply exist, fully, unapologetically themselves. But in the arena, you forget this truth. You paint not what you love, but what you think will win. And in doing so, you lose yourself. The worst tragedy of comparison is not that it exhausts you. It's that it redirects your life. Slowly, silently, you stop chasing what brings you joy and start chasing what brings recognition. You stop listening to your heart and start performing for an imaginary audience that never claps loud enough. Every step becomes about being seen, not about being alive. And so you live in the glare of spotlights, but never feel the warmth of sunlight. This is why comparison is not motivation. It is slavery. A slavery so subtle you don't even realize your chains until it's too late. Ask yourself, when was the last time you did something simply because it delighted you, not because it impressed someone? When was the last time you created for joy, not applause? As children, we played, we painted, we danced, without wondering if it was good enough. That innocence was pure freedom. But as adults, the arena steals it from us. It tells us we must always keep score, always rank ourselves, always prove. And yet, the truth is simple. The child who draws with crayons, lost in joy, is richer than the adult who performs for empty approval. Escaping the arena requires radical courage. You must stop keeping score altogether. Not sometimes, not when it's convenient. Completely. This means redefining success not by applause, not by comparison, but by alignment. Success becomes, did this make my soul light up? Did I honor my truth? Did I play my own game? The scoreboard in the arena will never show your worth. Tear it down, burn it. Then live in such a way that every step you take feels like art, not performance. That is freedom. That is victory. So tonight ask yourself, whose scoreboard am I living by? Whose race am I running? Am I painting my own canvas, or am I trying to copy someone else's masterpiece? Because comparison will never end. The crowd will never stop shouting. But you can choose to walk off the stage. You can choose to return to the simplicity of the child who creates for the sheer joy of creating. And when you do, you'll realize something profound. You were never behind. You were never late. You were never less. You were always enough, always. Chapter 3. The Theatre of Masks. Step into a crowded room where the applause never ends and the scripts are written in silence. Here, everyone is an actor rehearsing lines they never chose. The mask smiles, the handshake is firm, the timing is perfect. And yet the soul behind it yawns with a quiet aching fatigue. You agree to keep the peace. You laugh to belong. You dim your light so no one calls it too much. Day after day, the costume fits more tightly until the zipper won't open and the seams cut into your skin. Then one ordinary morning you catch your reflection and realize with a shock you can imitate any role, except the one you were born to play. The tragedy of the mask is not that it lies. It seduces. It offers safety, predictability, praise. It protects you from judgment, from rejection, from the sharp edge of vulnerability. But protection has a price. You cannot be loved for who you are while being applauded for who you are not. The claps get louder as your inner voice gets quieter, until the roar outside drowns the whisper within. You begin to curate your emotions like a gallery, acceptable joys in the front, exiled fears in the back, a velvet rope around your grief. The audience admires the exhibit. You go home empty. Performance is exhausting not because pretending is hard, because erasing is harder. You must erase the tremble in your voice when truth wants to come out. Erase the tear before it falls. Erase the no that would save you. And each erasure removes a pixel from your inner portrait until the image blurs. You start asking strangers for directions to your own life. What should I want? What should I post? What should I become? The mask answers for you. Be what works. But what works is a moving target, and chasing it turns your heart into a stage prop, shiny and hollow beneath the lights. I knew a high performer who could charm a boardroom in 10 seconds and silence a crowd in 20. Her resume glittered. Her eyes did not. She told me, every version of me is marketable except the real one. So she kept the costume pristine, agreeable, efficient, unshakable, until grief hit like thunder and no script could hold it. She broke on a Tuesday in a parking lot, not because she was weak, but because the mask had no lungs for breathing and no ribs for breaking. Pain is honest, masks are not. And honesty, though it burns, is the only thing that heals. The world rewards costumes with access, promotions, invitations, protection from the storm. But the bill arrives later, loneliness with interest. You can fill your calendar and still starve for intimacy. You can be surrounded and still be unseen. Because connection requires exposure, and exposure requires risk. And risk is the one line the costume forbids you to speak. So you barter authenticity for approval and call it maturity. You rename fear as professionalism, self-betrayal as compromise, silence as strength. But your nervous system keeps the receipts. It knows when you've abandoned your post. Removing the mask is terrifying because the first thing to return is sensation. Numbness melts, and you feel the weather inside your chest, the lightning of anger you buried, the rain of sadness you postponed, the fragile sunlight of joy you didn't trust. Your hands shake when you say the honest sentence out loud. Some will flinch. Some will leave. Let them. The room gets smaller before it gets truer. This is the sacred contraction before the birth, the narrowing that ushers a new life through. You are not losing people, you are losing the obligation to perform for them. Authenticity is not oversharing, it is accurate sharing. It is the courage to let your outer life align with your inner truth, one choice at a time. It sounds like, "That joke hurts me. I'm not available for this. I actually want something different." It looks like declining roles that pay well but cost your soul. It feels like oxygen returning to rooms that used to suffocate you, and with each honest act, your nervous system relearns safety. Not the brittle safety of approval, but the grounded safety of self-trust. You become someone your future can lean on. Here is your quiet revolution. Stand before the mirror and greet the face beneath the paint. Tell it, "I will not make you audition for your own life." Then practice small unveilings, 5% more truth in one conversation, one boundary where there used to be a smile. Watch who stays. Those who loved the costume will fade. Those who love your core will draw near, surprised and relieved to finally meet you. This is the promise of the theater of masks. When the curtain falls, the real audience appears, and not the crowd, but the few who clap with their hearts, because at last, you do too. Chapter 4. The Room of Silence. At first glance, the Room of Silence looks like paradise. No shouting, no slamming doors, no chaos. Smiles are practiced, voices are calm, the surface is smooth like glass. To outsiders, it looks like harmony. But step inside and you'll feel it. The suffocation of words swallowed whole, the weight of truths buried alive. Here, peace is an illusion carefully maintained. The silence isn't golden, it's toxic. It doesn't heal wounds, it hides them. And what hides festers. What festers poisons. This is not peace. This is decay disguised as calm. In families, friendships, and marriages that live in this silence, love becomes a performance. Everyone smiles at the dinner table while hearts quietly break under the surface. A wife cries in the shower so no one sees. A husband swallows his exhaustion so no one worries. A child learns to never say "I'm scared" because fear isn't welcome here. And slowly, each person disappears behind the mask of "I'm fine." But "I'm fine" is the greatest lie silence ever taught us. Because beneath the facade, each soul is screaming to be seen, heard, understood. The Room of Silence trains you to believe that emotional needs are selfish, that pain is weakness, that honesty is dangerous. So you master the art of pretending. You convince yourself that numbness is the same as peace, that avoiding conflict is the same as harmony. But numbness isn't peace, it's death in slow motion. Harmony isn't the absence of sound, it's the blending of truth. Without truth, there is no harmony, only a hollow quiet that eats away at the soul. Silence keeps the family portrait neat, but the hearts inside it cracked. I once met a family that bragged about never fighting. They wore it like a badge of honor. We're so close we never argue. But when I spoke to each of them separately, a different picture emerged. The mother carried silent depression, smiling through the weight of sadness. The father was drowning in pressure but had no one to tell. The children felt invisible, their feelings dismissed as overreactions. They weren't close, they were distant, quietly suffocating in the same house. The Room of Silence had stolen their ability to connect, and connection is the oxygen of love. The most painful part of this silence is not the absence of words, it's the absence of truth. When you cannot speak, you cannot heal. When you cannot be heard, you cannot belong. The silence whispers rules into your bones. Don't rock the boat. Don't tell them how you really feel. Keep it smooth, keep it pretty. And so you become skilled at suffering quietly. You learn to bite your tongue until it bleeds, smile until your jaw aches, laugh when you want to cry. You become a ghost in your own life, visible yet unseen. But here's the secret. Silence doesn't erase pain. It multiplies it. The feelings you hide don't die. They bury themselves in your nervous system. Anxiety, depression, loneliness, they sprout like weeds from the soil of unspoken truths. You can silence your words, but your body remembers. Your chest tightens, your throat locks, your heart races in the night. The Room of Silence is not a sanctuary. It's a slow suffocation chamber, and the only way to breathe again is to speak. Breaking the silence feels terrifying. You imagine storms, rejection, anger, but silence is already the storm, and it's just invisible. When you finally whisper, "I'm hurting, this isn't working," the illusion shatters. Some people will resist. They'll call you selfish, dramatic, difficult. But the truth is you're courageous, because honesty is not destruction. It is construction. Real peace is not built on denial. It is built on truth, on raw voices trembling but alive. It is built on the sacred risk of being real. So ask yourself tonight, what words are buried in my chest? What truths have I locked away to keep the peace? What sentences have I rehearsed in my head but never spoken out loud? Write them. Speak them. Even if your voice shakes, even if your hands tremble, say the words. Because silence may protect the image of peace, but truth builds the reality of it. And those who love you will stay, not because of the mask you wore, but because of the soul you finally revealed. Chapter 5. The Storm of Noise. If silence can kill the soul, so can noise. Step into this storm and you'll find no stillness, no pause, no breath. It is endless stimulation, endless distraction, endless motion without meaning. The phone buzzes, the headlines scroll, the gossip flows, the notifications never stop. You drown yourself not in water but in information, not to learn, not to grow, but to avoid. Avoid the voice inside you that waits in the quiet. This storm is seductive because it feels like life, but in reality, it is the loudest form of escape. The storm of noise whispers, "You are informed, you are connected, you are engaged." But what you don't realize is that you are consuming so much that nothing ever settles. You skim, you scroll, you react, but you don't reflect. Wisdom doesn't come from noise, it comes from silence. Yet the storm convinces you that the louder you are, the smarter you look, that the busier you seem, the more valuable you are. But truth is the opposite. You think you're busy, but you're not fulfilled. You think you're alive, but you're only reacting. I once knew a man who prided himself on being well-informed. Every morning, 3 newspapers. Every evening, hours of talk shows. He always had an opinion, always had a take, always ready to debate. But when I asked him, "What wisdom have you gained from all of this?" he froze. There was nothing. The storm had kept him occupied but never transformed. That's what noise does. It gives you the illusion of movement, while your soul stands still. Like running on a treadmill in the dark, panting, sweating, exhausted, yet never moving forward an inch. The most dangerous part of the storm is how natural it feels. We convince ourselves that we must stay plugged in, that silence means we'll fall behind, that stillness means we'll miss out. So we fill every empty moment with noise. The commute, the shower, the walk, the waiting room, all stuffed with podcasts, reels, messages, music. We don't allow a single breath of quiet. Because if we did, if the noise stopped, the voice we've been avoiding would rise like thunder, and most people would rather drown in noise than face their own truth. The storm numbs you by keeping you reactive. Outrage, breaking news, viral trends, you're always responding to something. But reflection requires stillness. Transformation requires pause. Without pause, nothing you consume becomes part of you. You read, but don't absorb. You listen, but don't hear. You live, but don't process. And so, you end up feeling full but starving, surrounded by endless noise, but unable to touch wisdom. It's like gorging on fast food for the mind. Plenty of flavor, but no nourishment. And slowly you become bloated with distractions, but starved of yourself. Here's the brutal truth. The noise is not random. It is chosen. It is your shield against the silence where your wounds live. That's why turning it off feels unbearable. The moment the phone goes dark, the anxiety rises. The regrets, the grief, the fears you've been outrunning come rushing to the surface. This is why you kept the storm alive. But here lies the paradox. Only by facing the discomfort of silence do you find clarity. Only by walking into the stillness do you finally hear your own inner voice. Noise is escape. Silence is discovery. The way out of the storm is terrifying but simple. Switch it all off. The news, the notifications, the endless chatter. Turn it off and let the silence roar back in. At first, it will feel like drowning. Your chest will tighten. Your mind will panic. You'll want to run back to the noise. Stay. Stay long enough for the anxiety to crest, to break, to fade, and then clarity begins to appear. Ideas you'd buried start to breathe. Feelings you'd ignored rise to the surface. The silence, once unbearable, becomes sacred. So ask yourself tonight, am I living in the storm? Am I addicted to distraction because I'm afraid of my own thoughts? Do I mistake busyness for purpose, noise for wisdom, scrolling for life? If the answer is yes, know this. Beyond the storm lies peace. Beyond the discomfort lies clarity. Beyond the silence lies your truth. The storm may roar loudly, but your soul whispers softly. And sometimes, the most radical act of courage is not to shout louder, but to turn everything off and listen. Chapter 6. The Chamber of Self-Betrayal. There is a place darker than silence, heavier than noise, more suffocating than masks. It is the chamber of self-betrayal. Here you abandon yourself piece by piece. You say yes when every nerve in your body screams no. You stay where your soul is quietly dying simply because leaving feels too frightening. At first, it looks noble. People applaud you for being agreeable, dependable, selfless. But deep down, you know the truth. This is not sacrifice, this is surrender. Not the kind that frees you, but the kind that erases you. Society will reward you for this betrayal. They will call it maturity. They will label it responsibility. They will praise you for ignoring your own needs while celebrating how much you give. But this is not virtue. It is a slow spiritual death dressed in polite words. Because the truth is simple. When you betray yourself for long enough, you forget who you are. You wake up one morning and realize you've built a life that fits everyone else's expectations and suffocates your own. The world applauds your role while the actor inside is quietly breaking. Self-betrayal never begins with grand choices. It begins with small compromises. A yes to one request you didn't want. A silence when you should have spoken. A decision to stay when you longed to leave. Each choice feels minor, but 1,000 small betrayals carve deep scars into your soul. Before long, you don't even know what you want anymore. When someone asks, "What do you desire?" you freeze. Not because you lack desire, but because you've spent years burying it. The whispers of your own truth have been drowned in the applause of others. I once knew a woman who spent 20 years in a career she despised, married to a man she didn't love, living in a city that made her heart heavy. When I asked her why she stayed, her answer was simple. It made sense. The job was stable. The marriage was safe, the family approved. On paper, she looked successful. But inside, she was crumbling. She had betrayed herself so many times that her instincts were no longer audible. The chamber had stolen her voice, and without a voice, she could no longer call herself alive. Here's the cruel irony. The world celebrates this kind of betrayal. It says, "Look how reliable you are, look how mature you've become." But maturity is not the abandonment of your truth. Responsibility is not the suffocation of your soul. Real love is not destroying yourself so others can feel whole. This chamber convinces you that pleasing others is the highest good. But love born of self-erasure is not love, it's manipulation. You cannot pour from an empty well, and you cannot love others authentically while betraying yourself at the root. The chamber of self-betrayal is not just external, it's internal. Over time, you become so skilled at ignoring yourself that you don't even notice when you're bleeding. Your gut, once loud, now whispers. Your instincts, once clear, now feel like static. You learn to gaslight yourself. It's not that bad, I should be grateful, I'm just overreacting. But gratitude without honesty is not gratitude. It's denial. And denial kills slowly. You may survive in this chamber, but you will never thrive. And life is not meant to be survived, it is meant to be lived. Escaping this chamber requires something radical, something the world may call selfish. But it is sacred. You must reclaim your choices. You must begin asking, what do I actually want? What feels right in my body? What truth am I avoiding because it will disappoint others? And then, most terrifying of all, you must act on those answers. People will resist. They may call you difficult, rebellious, ungrateful. Let them. Their disappointment is not your death sentence. Your self-betrayal is. And the cost of staying in the chamber is far greater than the cost of leaving it. So remember this. You cannot love others while betraying yourself. You cannot serve the world while silencing your own soul. You cannot keep giving from a well that has run dry. To live by your truth is not arrogance. It is alignment. To reclaim your choices is not rebellion. It is rebirth. Tonight, ask yourself, where am I saying yes that should be a no? Where am I staying when my soul wants to walk away? And then dare to step out. Because outside the chamber lies freedom, and freedom is the birthplace of real love. Chapter 7. The Basement of Shadows. Beneath every polished smile, beneath every tidy story we tell the world, lies a basement. It is the place where we hide what feels unlovable, unworthy, unacceptable. Anger too sharp, sadness too heavy, shame too unbearable. We sweep it down the stairs, slam the door and call it gone. But here's the truth. What you bury does not die. It grows in the dark. It waits. And one day, when you least expect it, the basement door bursts open, and the shadows you denied walk out to claim the life you thought you controlled. Think about the anger you swore you would never become. Maybe it belonged to your father, maybe to someone who hurt you. You promised yourself, I will never be like that. So you shoved your anger into the basement. Years later, it erupts at your children, your partner, a stranger in traffic. That wasn't sudden rage. It was the ghost of your denied self, gathering strength in silence. This is the cruelty of the basement. The very traits you reject become the ones that run your life. You don't destroy them by hiding them. You become possessed by them. Carl Jung warned us, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The basement of shadows is not a mistake. It is a mirror. Every part you lock away doesn't vanish. It waits for recognition. The sadness you buried is not weakness. It can become deep empathy. The shame you denied is not filth. It can turn into compassion for others who carry the same wounds. Even the rage you despise holds power, the raw fuel to fight injustice and protect what you love. The shadow is not the enemy, denial is. I once knew a man who despised his father's anger. He swore he'd be calm, composed, rational. For years he wore the mask of control. But the anger didn't die. It lived underground, swelling like a storm. The first time it erupted, it wasn't measured. It was monstrous. He terrified his children, the very ones he'd vowed to protect. That's the paradox of the basement. The more you deny what's inside, the stronger it grows. Shadows demand light, and if you refuse to give it willingly, they will break the lock and force you to face them. The basement of shadows is terrifying because it holds everything we fear about ourselves, but it also holds the key to our wholeness. Integration begins when you descend into the basement, not as a warrior, not as a judge, but as a witness. When you turn on the light and say, yes, this too is me. The rage, the grief, the jealousy, the shame, all of it belongs. Not to control you, but to complete you. Wholeness is not found in perfection, it is found in acceptance. You cannot heal what you refuse to acknowledge. Facing the basement is not easy. At first it feels like drowning. Memories resurface, feelings you've avoided for years crash like waves. You may tremble, you may weep. But remember, the shadows cannot kill you. They are parts of you longing to return home. The anger you hid wants to protect you. The grief you denied wants to soften you. The shame you carried wants to humble you. By making space for them, you don't become darker. You become brighter. Because the light that accepts its darkness cannot be extinguished. This is the alchemy of the soul. Anger into passion, sadness into empathy, shame into compassion. Every shadow contains its opposite. Every wound hides wisdom. When you embrace the basement, you discover that the very things you feared were the roots of your greatest power. Integration doesn't make you perfect. It makes you real. And real is stronger than perfect. Real can bend, bleed, and still rise. The basement is not a curse. It is a sacred vault holding the parts of you that are waiting to be reclaimed. So tonight, dare to ask, what have I locked in my basement? What anger have I denied? What grief have I buried? What shame have I hidden from the world and from myself? Don't turn away. Don't keep the door closed. Descend with courage. Carry a light. Whisper, I see you. I accept you. Because the day you make peace with your shadows is the day they stop controlling you. That is the path to wholeness. That is the journey of becoming fully human. And that is where your true freedom begins. Conclusion: escape the traps. The hall of mirrors, the arena of comparison, the theater of masks, the room of silence, the storm of noise, the chamber of self-betrayal, the basement of shadows. At first they seem separate, but they are not. They live inside you, woven into your mind, disguised as safety, comfort, even success. And every day, you step into them, often without realizing. These are not places out there in the world. They are prisons within, built brick by brick from fear, shame, and denial. And yet the lock is not on the outside, it is in your hand. The truth is simple. You have a choice: to stay trapped or to step out, to repeat the cycle or to break it, to keep living in reflections, comparisons, masks, silence, noise, betrayal, and shadows, or to begin the radical journey of reclaiming yourself. The world will beg you to remain inside these rooms. It will call your chains normal. It will label your suffocation success. But you know better. You feel the weight. You hear the whispers in the night. And that discomfort you've been ignoring, that's not weakness, that's your soul begging for freedom. Final message. The world doesn't need another mask. It doesn't need another performer, another copy, another slave to comparison. The world doesn't need a quieter silence or louder noise. It needs you. The raw, unedited, authentic you. The you that laughs too loudly. The you that cries when it hurts. The you that says no when it means no. The you that carries shadows and still dares to shine. Because the moment you step out of these traps, you give permission for others to do the same. And that ripple, that courage, that truth, that is how the world heals. Call to action. If this message struck you, don't just scroll away, share it. Because someone you know is still trapped right now, and your share might be their key. And tell me in the comments, which of these 7 prisons have you lived in? And how are you escaping? Because healing begins when you speak it. Freedom begins when you name it. And transformation begins when you realize the cage was never locked.